So let me just briefly introduce you to the three of them. First, we have Dr. Janet Fender here. Janet earned a master's degree in 1978 and a PhD in 1981 from the Optical Sciences Center here. She is our 2026 Wyant College of Optical Sciences Alumna of the Year, and our reception and celebration for that is tomorrow. She has spent her career serving as a leader in science and defense technology. Janet retired as the scientific advisor and commander-chief scientist for Air Combat Command Langley in 2018. She is a recipient of the U.S. Presidential Distinguished Service Rank Award, a fellow and former president of OSA, now Optica, and a fellow of SPIE. Janet and her husband, John Otten, who is here as well, created the Optica Women Scholars Program, for which Janet has served as mentor. The program has provided scholarships for numerous scholars around the world since its inception, including 11 University of Arizona students. Next over, we have Dr. Susan Houde-Walter. She is an optical physicist, entrepreneur, and academic. An adjunct professor at Wyant College of Optical Sciences, Susan was formerly a professor at University of Rochester and also the director of the Center for Imaging Science at Rochester Institute of Technology. Susan is CEO of LMD Power of Light Corp and co-founder of LaserMax Inc., as well as fellow and past president of Optica. Having served on multiple boards within defense and industry, she received the Commander's Awards for public service from both the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army. And we have Dr. Imelda J.Atencio, who received her master's degree in 1993 from Optical Sciences Center and then returned to complete her PhD in 2003 here as well. She has served as an optical engineer at the Air Force Research Lab since 1987, including 19 years at the Large Adaptive Optics Telescope Facility, Starfire Optical Range. She is currently Laser Division Chief in the Directed Energy Directorate at AFRL and an expert on laser propagation, advanced optical system engineering, adaptive optics, and optical communications. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the three of you.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Dean, and congratulations on your deanship and leadership position. And thank you all for being flexible on your concept of colloquium, because this is a little different. It's not your usual technical colloquium. What we wanted to do, Susan, Imelda, and myself, is give you a little peek into our careers, just so that you might have some thoughts of what you want to do with yours as you're going forward and going into your careers. You have so much flexibility. So we just thought we'd just peek into what we've done with our degrees in optical sciences, nothing in depth. And we want to be brief so that we have a lot of time for you all to interact. We've had some great interactions already this morning. So thank you all for being here to continue those interactions. Yeah, so, okay. Well, let's see, which is advance. This one?
The down arrow.
Ta-da! Okay, first slide. So why don't I just begin at the beginning, as they say. So the reason that we really wanted to come and talk with you all is because we just think you have made such a great choice, whether it was on purpose or by accident, but you have made an incredible choice in career fields in optics. Just technically stimulating. Your life is going to be so interesting. You're never going to be bored. You're always going to be learning. You also have the flexibility to go in a lot of different directions, because in this college, as you know, you specialize, but you have to have a knowledge across the board in so many different areas of optics. So you're qualified to go in a lot of different directions. You won't be bored in your life. Third, your skills and talents are in high demand. So what that does is it puts you in control of your future, of your career. You can shape what you're doing. you can determine your career. So that is really a motivation for us to be showing you some alternatives, alternative careers. So our message is, well, first of all, congratulations for your choice of optics. And we want to say that amazing careers are yours for the making. In other fields, you might have to accept what you get. Not in optics. Your career is yours for the making. As Shakespeare said, the world is your oyster. All right. I think, and this is just my opinion, okay, but I really believe that your first job is just really, really important. And so you really have to be thinking before you go out and job interview and get smitten by, some recruiter, whatever. What is it you really want to be doing? And so I'll just tell you, in my case, I really wanted to find an environment where I could see a big picture. And I had a lot of classmates that were being recruited to companies where they were going to be put on a particular study. We talked about this a few minutes ago. And you only saw, you were the mushroom, as they say. You only saw what you were working about and working on, and you didn't know what it was all about. So I was looking for an environment where I could get a big picture of what I was doing, why I was doing it. And in my case, I chose the Air Force Weapons Laboratory at the time. Now it's called the Air Force Research Laboratory. Why? Because I was able to work on President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative. Big, important national program looking for technologies that were going to be game changers. I was able to work on the space-based laser. This program used to be called Star Wars. It was before you were born, but you may have heard it in the annals of history. But at any rate, it was so great to be working from a government laboratory perspective, because I got to see the great work that was being done by industry to make this program a reality. It was being designed and critical experiments were being done, as well as we were able to do within the government lab the end-to-end modeling and simulation. And I'm talking multiple disciplinary. And it was more than optics. I learned multiple disciplines. I learned that optics are not standalone constructs on a paper. They have structures around them, and they have vibrations and thermal loads and control systems. And in my first year of work, I just learned so much. It was incredible. And at the same time, I was insisting before I took the job that I would have the opportunity to continue my hands-on technical skills. So when you're negotiating for your job, in my case, I insisted on two things. I want to see the big picture, and I want to have my own laboratory with a group to continue technical work. I'm not going to give that up. So it was great because we got to cherry pick at the lab of what programs we thought were going to be really high payoff that industry wasn't doing. So industry was getting paid to develop the space-based laser, experiment with it, and so forth. And we were able to say, oh, what's the next generation technology that we want to demonstrate in the laboratory? Now, one thing I do want to clarify, I never worked in the laboratory with a liquid silver necklace. I am still alive. I haven't been electrocuted, but this was a PR shot. The other thing that we've talked about quite a bit today, one thing that I learned in my first job was the importance of effective communication. When I was in graduate school, I learned to give a paper, a technical paper with lots of equations to my peers at a technical conference. Of course, I was scared to death the first time, but nonetheless, it was as trying to be as smart as you could possibly be and have the most sophisticated paper and so forth to your peers. What I learned when I went to work was if I was going to represent my work and it was going to be understood, I had to make it understandable. So I had to learn to basically explain my work so that my bosses who were very smart people, but they didn't have degrees or experience in optics, could understand conceptually what I was trying to communicate and why I needed to go forward with this work to justify it, to get, say, more budget, for example, or to show what the difficult portions were. So effective communications, now you say this, right? So it's very different than giving a technical paper. You need to be able to speak understandably and communicate concepts understandably. I just think that's a very important thing to remember. See if this works. Okay. One thing I learned also with this multiple disciplinary experience was to work with teams that were not all optics people. They had different specialties, multidisciplinary teams. And the thing that I learned from my laboratory work is that it really makes a difference if you can take your results from the laboratory and take them into an operational setting and demonstrate their usefulness, and not stop at the laboratory, but take it out to the field. So the example I'm going to show you is this is the observatory in Maui, top of Haleakala. It is an Air Force Base surveillance site. Their mission is to observe satellites as they pass overhead, catalog the satellites, space debris, and so forth, and just keep track of what's up there. High resolution imaging is really important to see the health of a satellite, for example. What's on that satellite? And a common problem is solar panels don't deploy. And you know what? The radar technology that's used assumes symmetry. So it doesn't show a non-deployed solar panel. It just assumes. Optical imagery doesn't lie. What you see is what's really happening. So we were able from the laboratory to take our ground-based imaging technology out to a Space Command site, an operational site, military site, and we used the white telescopes, the smaller telescopes, only 1.5 meter telescopes aperture, but use adaptive optics. And there we demonstrated, the group demonstrated the highest resolution image of a satellite passing overhead ever collected by a ground site. Therefore, the customer went, I guess they know what they're doing. Oh my God, we had some credibility. And we were part of this government lab. We weren't selling them anything. It was the work that we were doing for the government, for them anyway. So we then developed credibility and trustability. So when Aidan Minell, as in the Minell building, when he talked to the Air Force and Senator Inouye and said, I think this site, which was only the white telescopes that you see there, not the reflective large one, this site needs a 4-meter class telescope. Just think of how much better you can do on space surveillance if you had a 4-meter class telescope. Senator Inouye said, hot dog, that's what we're doing. Well, because our group was out there and we were credible, we got the responsibility being in charge of the design and the construction and the integration of this telescope, the largest telescope in the Department of Defense. You can do this too. If this interests you, you can do these sort of things too. I mean, to me, it was exhilarating. It was multidisciplinary. It was working with a team. It was definitely optics. It was a 3.67 meter primary with adaptive optics that had to not only correct for the atmosphere, but had to track these satellites. They scoot across the sky, but had to track with precision and show high resolution imaging. And I just wanted to say that these are the kind of opportunities that you can take advantage of. They're out there in the world. If this interests you, if this interests you. So I know you're being trained in your lab specialty and your optical specialty and so forth. Launch off into that, but think about what you want to do for just imagine for the rest of your career. What do you want to do? These are some ideas. Next slide, please. Okay. All right. So after 24 years of working at the laboratory where we were developing technology that we just knew was great for the user, was brilliant technology, and we take it out and demonstrate it. And for the most part, it was adopted and put into operations. But, sometimes we fell flat on that. I started thinking, you know what? Why don't I go from the technology push mode to a technology pull? Let's go into an operational environment and see firsthand what really is a high payoff technology for a user, for an operator, for a customer. So such a position didn't exist. I went to the chief. Happened to be in a workshop with the Secretary of the Air Force. It was just fortuitous. I mean, sometimes you look at your life and you go, it's just been a whole bunch of luck, just stumbling into things. And I took this opportunity and said, what about a scientist at an operational command? And he immediately said, Air Combat Command. Air Combat Command? What do I know about air combat? Well, I better not say that aloud. He wouldn't send me. And Air Combat Command is exactly what it sounds like. It's the fighters, the bombers, the remotely piloted vehicles. They're called drones on television. It is the Air Force calls this the pointy end of the spear. It's air combat, what the Air Force is about. They didn't have a chief scientist. The headquarters is at Langley in Virginia. Davis-Monthan is an Air Combat Command base, by the way, your neighbor, Air Combat. So I was assigned over. It's kind of a 1 year, let's give it a whirl, and the commander, the 4-star, I don't know. I mean, 4 stars is all the stars you get. Somebody's at the door. Somebody wants to come in. Said, frankly, I don't know what I'm going to do with a scientist. So, I mean, he was honest about it. Okay, give me a whirl, give me 6 months. So it was 6 months feedback. I got to know the command. That picture over there is, I was invited as a scientist to go on on a mission where a new technology was being integrated. This was an F-16, and they were combining their operational training with using this new technology. And they wanted me to see right up close. They're the operators doing the evaluation. They wanted me to help with the technical evaluation part of it, so we could collaborate on, this is your operational assessment, this is my technical assessment. So I was able to go fly with these brave young men and women who were putting their lives on the line for us when necessary. So I want to give them the best technology that we can ever provide them so they can go do their mission and come home safely. So that was quite an amazing, experimental position. At the end of this 6 months, I was waiting for my evaluation. I went to the boss's office, is he going to say, oh, Janet, you just don't get it, He said, I don't know why we don't have a chief scientist in this command. So he got a position 14 years later. That's what it is. So the reason that I'm telling you these things is just to open your minds a little bit, to say, I know you see a lot of straight paths in your technical fields. It might not be a straight path. You might not want it to be a straight path. You know, when I finish my dissertation, you know, everybody wants to be the expert in that dissertation area. Your life might lead you to other things. But with your training in optics, you are so flexible. You know, the world is your oyster. And I would just end by, what's wrong with my clicking ability now? Uh-oh. I'm not clicking. Maybe the battery was slow. So we do have a few more slides. Okay. So I wanted to leave with one other message, and that is, and it's about people. It's so important to collaborate. I found that I didn't do anything by myself. I did nothing on my own. Just remember to collaborate, please. Stay in touch with each other. Work together. Call on your peers for help and collaboration, to have confidential conversations with if you'd like. And remember to help others, because the world is your oyster. So share it. Susan, and I have to tell you, I'm just the startup number. So now comes the better part.
Well, my goodness, thank you. It's a different part in any event. Thank you. Thanks, Janet. So I think we're going to do this from here. So let me try that. So my name is Susan. My last name is kind of unpronounceable. My email is here. I invite you to contact me. I will put that up one more time since it's a mouthful. Okay, so I started life. Oh, a new battery. Thank you. Yeah, find out. Okay, down and up matters which way you're pointing. Okay, well then that would be that end. Okay, thank you. I started life as an artist, meaning painting, sculpture, printmaking, so on. I graduated high school early, but without any math, with one biology course. I graduated college without any math, one biology course, no physics, no chemistry, no math. And I lived in New York City and just happened to be on a bus going downtown, 6th Avenue. Two people come on the bus, and one guy's got this big belt buckle on. He walks right into a sunbeam, and all of a sudden, this image pops out. I was like, what the heck is that? It was pretty weird. And then some lady in a silver jumpsuit with a hood has this thing swinging, and same thing happens. Another image pops out of her pendant. I don't even remember where I was going because I popped off the bus. I chased them down and I said, what are those things? And they said, oh, these are holograms. I decided I was going to try and make holograms as an art form. Problem is I didn't have any background, and I decided, okay, well, I found out you need a laser. So I bought a laser, and I found some folks who had a sand table, and I traded my laser for time on the sand table, and I started making holograms and experimenting with the camera. Has anybody here made a hologram, a display hologram? Anybody else? Just a couple of you. It's not like a camera. You build the old-fashioned holograms, you build, not talking about computer-generated ones, you build the camera around the thing that you want to make a hologram of. So I started experimenting, and all my experiments came out totally wrong. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. So what I decided was I was going to learn a little bit, and I started going to NYU. I don't know how is this? Nah. Okay. So I decided that I was going to learn a little bit about math. I kind of finagled a job at the Museum of Philosophy, running their bookstore, which meant I got access to technical books in a language, math, that I didn't understand. So I went to NYU and ended up in the honors track at the Karanis Institute. I loved math, had never had exposure to it. I ended up going to MIT for a summer, loved it. Didn't find enough optics, so I ended up in Rochester, and I did a master's and a PhD, and then I was asked to stay on as faculty. And as you probably have already figured out, it's a very slippery slope with optics. You just get right in, okay? And then ended up doing, now we call it Optica, but ended up, you know, just moving on in my career with volunteer work and so on. I think I'm going to use this, pardon me. So that's just a photograph of me with my daughter on the vacuum system I built when I was a graduate student. I had her, by the way, during my last experiment. It's an interesting experience. And that's a quick photograph of me doing a derivation of the Leonard-Weichert potentials. And I was a professor for 18 years at the University of Rochester. But in the meantime, I mean, I was married. My husband and I always had basement labs. We were constantly building laboratories in kitchen pantries, living rooms, I'm not kidding, basements when we could get them, and so on. And my husband decided he had to have his own company, and I would be the one to write the business plans and blah, blah, blah. So we had a company, and that was fine, but then he got really sick. So I was brought in to relieve him, and I let go of a tenured faculty. Anybody here have tenure? You know what it means, right? To walk away from a tenured faculty position. And I eventually became CEO of this company, which at the time was called LaserMax. So we're basically a laser manufacturer. And it's a long story that I don't need to bore you with, but I eventually got into working with national security boards and so on, and did a lot of travel with our military and so on. But this one, we're going to fix something. Hang on. Can you actually hear me? I can't tell. There's no way I can tell. I just see a lot of lights and it's on. Ah, okay, fair enough. Does that advance? Perfect, thank you. I will use it. Thanks. So let me tell you just a brief bit about the company for context. So, you know, like I said, we started in the basement, eventually hired over the years about 350 employees and another 50 contractors or so. At any one time, we were never more than, I had 75 employees. But we're really innovative, and we had a lot of patents. We were constantly inventing things. We were a program of record with the military. Anybody who does work with the DoD knows that's kind of a big deal. And we sold, you know, well over 1 million lasers into law enforcement, industry, commercial markets, and so on. The technologies that we work with were diode lasers, solid state lasers, and then my thing was quantum cascade lasers. We did a lot of work in developing quantum cascade lasers, hardening them, packaging them, putting them into fieldable equipment, and so on. We were a cleared facility, a lot of government paperwork. Man, do they have paperwork. And early, at the beginning, we were working with law enforcement. These slides, I'm going to zip through these because we really want to talk with you rather than at you. But you'll see this is just an early slide from an early period in the company where we sort of, it was international actually. And then we got into work for our military. I'm not going to go through all this stuff. We just invented a lot of laser stuff that was useful. Just going to keep going if you don't mind. And you know what I wanted to say is we worked really closely with our customers. So we were technical people. I had a really nice, I mean, actually they were outstanding, engineering group. But what was really key to our company was to have people who had worked in the military and could interface with the military. I'm not talking about business development. I'm talking about people who developed equipment, so that we were developing equipment that really worked for the right types of situations that our customers found themselves in. So there is one stock, it's not even a stock folder. I didn't take this photograph, but that's all from our work. And like I was saying, we had a lot of people who worked in military, or they were reservists, so they were either retired or reservists, or law enforcement who were retired. And that formed our company culture, was a very important thing. And I guess I would say that culture matters more than people generally will admit. So, oh, and then I also got invited onto a bunch of science boards, traveled around a lot with our military. Same deal. Find out who the people you're serving, what matters to them, meet them on their turf, learn their language, and you can do a better job of it. But we're still technical people, right? Oh, by the way, you know, in this little yellow circle, I don't think Janet can see this. That's Janet Fender. We we served on we both served on Army Science Board. I'm sorry, not the Army Science Board, the Air Force Science Advisory Board on a project together. That's true. Okay. Pardon me? Yes, as far as I know. As far as I know, but let's get rid of it. Okay. Yeah, these aren't marked. Okay. So like I said, I started my life. So the axes are time and hopefully expertise, but at least change in what I was doing. I started life, I mean, until I was like in my 20s as an artist, and you know, did the whole artist stuff, which is basically the starving artist stuff, until I started going to school, back to school again, to learn math and then optics and slippery slope stuff again. You know, I never looked back. I really got lucky. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just doing what I loved. And so I went through the optics education, then turned into a professor, as I mentioned. And then, you know, the break point here is where my husband got sick and I took over a company, which is a really big change in career, I have to tell you. And then went on to be the director of another optics and imaging department at a different school, Rochester Institute of Technology. But what I really wanted to tell you is there's another career path here that people don't often talk about, and that's what you're doing as volunteer. And it's just as important, in my opinion, as it is what you're doing on your main reportable, you know, what you would put on your CV. So when I was a graduate student, the first female president of Optica, it was called the Optical Society of America at the time, but the first president who was female, her name was Jean Bennett. And for some reason, she came to the university and she said, gee, you know, I need someone to do a brochure on optics careers. Boy, this is all comes full circle, doesn't it? And I said, well, I know, can we put a hologram on the front? I'm still into the holography thing. She said, yeah, I think we can do that. And I was all in. So as a graduate student, I started volunteering. They actually made this brochure with a hologram on the front, with all this stuff. I mean, they did, I mean, it was cool because we got to design it and they actually did it. And then I started to get hooked, did a bunch of things, you know, editorial, running meetings, that kind of thing for the same organization. And this continued while I was a professor. And then I got elected to the board of directors. And then I got elected to the presidential chain. And this was fairly easy to do as an academic because academics have a lot of control of what they do every day and when they do things and so on. It's not all sunshine and roses, but they do have a lot of control over their time. Then break, I leave and go into industry, and I got pulled on a program to go into theater, which was interesting. We ended up in some pretty funny situations in CENTCOM, which at the time was, you know, in the Middle East. And I learned something about our customers, and so I kept going. I don't think I would have been invited by the Pentagon to do that unless I had also done the professor, the CEO, and all the Optica stuff. So it builds, is my point. And that will show up. People will start recommending you for stuff. And then from there, I was asked to be on the Army Science Board. Now, we just got doged several months ago, but for many years, I was on the Army Science Board doing studies for Army to help answer questions that Army had. And similarly, for the Air Force Science Advisory Board, and then from there, and you know what I'm saying is these things build, okay? And they just keep going. But it's not just for your resume. Actually, it shouldn't be for your resume. It's about opening up your world. You learn things, you interact with people, your circles widen. It's a very good thing to do. And if you can possibly find the time to do it, I would encourage you. It has, at least in my case, been very rewarding. Okay, let's see, let's move on. Oh yeah, oh, by the way, I'm adjunct here. Okay, so I just, unsolicited advice. Sorry, but I'm going to give it to you. You are all at a point, for the students anyway, are at a time in your life where you're making super important decisions. Like Janet was just saying, Dr. Fender was just saying, your first job is very important. Well, you're at, it's not just your job, it's job, family, all the rest of that. There are a lot of key decisions that you need to make. Make them with information. So, for example, if you can possibly do it, visit other schools, go to conferences, go on industry visits. If you're able to do co-ops, do that. All of that stuff will give you information about, it'll test, do I like this stuff or do I like that better? I personally found that very useful to do. I, again, was lucky, ended up working for a faculty advisor during my graduate work who liked to take students on travel, and I went every time. And if I had an opportunity to give talks, I would be the first one with a hand up. And it just tells you a lot about yourself and what your options are. Let's see, the third bullet, so I covered the first two. The third bullet is, we're human beings. We think better when we're not under a lot of pressure. So if you can relieve any kind of pressure, financial pressure, if you can save up before you have to make a decision about where you're going to make your next move, that can, in principle, be useful. Now, candidly, you guys are all Psi, right? You're all optics people. You're going to have a lot of opportunities. So I don't think you're going to need that third bullet, but who knows? Life changes, right? Okay, most people want families and most people want friends. This can be very difficult for high pressure or very demanding jobs when you have children or elderly parents that need to be taken care of, or sick spouses or whatever. Because you're going to have, and we only get 24 hours a day, right? Any of us, that's all we've got. And we do sometimes need to sleep. So you have to, it doesn't have to be you personally to take care of the kids all the time or take care of your sick dad or whatever it is, but arrangements have to be made so someone does it, okay? It's really critical that you are clear, and if a spouse is involved, that they are also in agreement with how you're going to do that. Hierarchy of needs. I'm not telling you which is most important, except for this one. You absolutely have to take care of yourself or you can't help anybody else, obviously, but you need to decide what's more important, my kids or my work, okay? My spouse or my kids, my friends or my work. You have to make those decisions. Be really clear about stuff and reflect on it before you commit yourself to one lifestyle or another. I would say that the time spent thinking about that is worthwhile. Okay, mentors matter too. So my rule of thumb is you want one mentor for each year of your age. So obviously it starts with mom, and then there's dad, and there might be your grandparents and so on, and your teachers and so forth. But as you get to the ages that you are, you should be developing a mentor network now. It takes work. You have to work as well as the mentor works, right? You need to engage with your mentors as well. You need to reach out to them. It's not just them touching you. You need to reach out to them. But when you have things that you're not too sure about, or you just want to bounce some ideas off of someone, having a mentor network is extremely valuable. It, again, gives you a lot more, it makes you aware of more options than you otherwise have. And then the optics community, man, we are tight. And everybody in this room, you guys are going to know each other for the rest of your lives. so be friendly to each other because you're going to know each other. All right, academia. So I'm just going to give a brief rundown. So unlike Dr. Fender, I did not work in a national lab. I haven't worked in a national lab, but I have worked in academia and I have worked in industry. So I just say a couple of pointers about that. Academia is not an easy ride. I personally found that, and this was even after tenure, I was working 78 hours a week. The old adage, it doesn't feel like work if you're enjoying it. That's true, but it's still your time. There is, especially for women with traditional roles, there is significant pressure to achieve tenure at the same age range when you would normally be starting a family. And, you get into situations where you have to make choices about what you're going to do. There's also tons of pressure, and I know the faculty in the room know about this, to raise funds for supporting students. So you have to be willing to step up to that. It's not the same as running a business, but it is a responsibility. You have to be able to do it. Having said that, there's nothing better than teaching and research. I mean, it is a blast. So if you think you can bear the first three bullets, the last bullet can make it all worthwhile. All right, industry. In large companies, usually you have better job security in large companies than you do in small, but you probably will only know your division, unless you get way up in the ranks like Dr. Fender. But it's very important to know who leads whatever division that you join, because that's going to be your environment and your world. But you need to know, preferably before you get there, does your boss have the authority and willingness to promote you? Because if he or she does not, you will not move. So it's really important that you know who that person is, how supportive that person is of his or her people, and is your boss or prospective boss, does that person have the gravitas and the authority and the wherewithal to promote you? Find that out before you join. And then, like I said, the culture piece is really important. You need to feel a sense of whatever the mission is of the organization that you join. That needs to resonate with you. Because if it doesn't, you're not going to fit and you won't succeed. So you need to identify what do I think is important in the world? I guess somebody said, what makes me want to get up and go do that thing? It's very important. Okay, what else do we have here? Small companies. So this is a really important one. There are a lot of small companies around, but if they're not profitable, they're not going to be sustainable. So you got to find out and just ask them, are you profitable? How long have you been profitable? If they're not, because there are a lot of companies aren't, how are they funded? What does it depend on? Because if they're not funded and it looks too shaky, there's going to be a point where your funding is going to go away. And I don't necessarily mean for your lab. I mean, would you getting a paycheck? So that all boils down to what your risk tolerance is and all that good stuff. So I'm going to shut up because we really do want to have this be a conversation. That's my email. If you email me with a subject line oyster, I will be very happy to respond. Okay, and I'm going to turn this over now to Imelda.
All right, let's see if we can. Yep, got that. There we go. So it's a pleasure to be back here at U of A. Always like to come back to the university and to Optical Sciences Center. So I'm going to start this off by, I loved astronomy as a kid, and I just want you to notice that the Orion Nebula really has a look like Dr. Fender's oyster. So I thought I'd point that out when I was putting this together, and I thought, there's my oyster, and Orion has always been my favorite constellation. I was able to photograph it in high school and got the nebula, and so it's just always been my favorite. So I thought that was perfect for this. So as I said, my career really is a love of astronomy that led me to my career in optical engineering, and so it's kind of a bit of a story, and like everybody else here and stuff. So I grew up in a really, really small town in northern New Mexico where it was really dark. And I was always outside looking at the stars because that was my fun. There was one little street light down the road, but it didn't really get in the way. And so, you know, my goal since I was, as long as I can remember, was to sit on a mountaintop with my telescope. I even tried to figure out where could I put it nearby, you know, where I grew up. You know, I had all these visions and I wanted to learn how to make mirrors. I'd sit there at the malls when malls first came in. Yes, I'm old. And go through Sky and Telescope and find books that could teach you how to make a mirror and a telescope. And so that was my starting. I went to New Mexico State University, started off in double E, and actually started off in physics at Pomona in California, but it's a long story, it's too expensive, came back home, and went to the double E department, and they were starting a program in electro-optics from Dr. Mike Giles, who actually came from the University of Arizona. You're nodding your head. And so he started the double E program. At that time, it was more unique than most programs now have emphasis in different areas, but at that time it was fairly unique in the country, or at least in the Southwest. And New Mexico State had that, and so they started, you know, they had like power and circuits and whatever, and engineering, I mean, and computers at the time, because at that, you know, computers were just getting started. You probably don't, nobody, a couple of you back there would remember that part. And as some of you may remember, Dr. Jack Gaskell, who had been the dean of, was it like the students here for optical sciences? And Mike Giles had invited him over to New Mexico State. And I went and listened to that, and I said, oh, that's perfect. I need to figure out how I'm going to go there. How in the world am I going to get to Arizona? And so that was my initial goal. And so I went to the Air Force Research Lab, and let's see, I'm kind of flipping a little bit, but no, we'll just go like this. And went to the Air Force Research Lab because I had to figure out how I was going to pay. I felt like I was in debt up to my eyeballs. I think you guys are much worse. I looked back and I said that was nothing compared to what you guys are dealing with today. So I'm really sorry about all of that. But regardless, I went there. I figured out that industry and government labs, and specifically government labs, would send their employees back to school. And it seemed like government labs were a little bit more lenient on what you wanted to study. I had one job offer that wanted me to go get a master's in computer science. I said, yeah, I like that, but my goal was optics. And so at the Air Force Research Lab, I started in at the tail end of what Janet had been part of, Dr. Fender had been part of the Strategic Defense Initiative, aka Star Wars. So my first job was the tail end of that, and I started to learn a little bit about adaptive optics at that time. And then Dr. Fender scooped me up somehow. She was very good in mentoring women, because there was very few of us at that time. And this is in the late 80s. And because she'd come here, she helped me get to University of Arizona. So talk about a most awesome mentor, and to be able to be here for her honor tomorrow is just a blessing. And her husband, John Otten, was also very instrumental in me getting a second term. It was a little bit different type of structure at that time, so it took some finagling. So I owe those to really my degree and my career. So I came here for 3 years, and I then went back to the Air Force Research Lab and was working on a program that was part of the Maui telescope, the 3.67, and there was literally a joint buy between that and the Starfire Optical Range, which is a large telescope facility on Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico. And so, you know, that would be my dream job, sitting on a mountaintop. And because of the connections between the two telescopes and the buys for some of the equipment, fast steering mirrors, wavefront sensors, etc., I was able to get myself an interview with Dr. Robert Fugate, who is really the one that developed the Starfire Optical Range and the adaptive optics system. And I still remember, he says, why would you want to come out here to the SOR instead of just coming out and doing experiments? And I said, I love telescopes. and there's probably more to it than that. He tells the major, go figure out how to hire her. And Janet was very helpful in getting there as well. I remember coming to talk to you about that. And so I spent 19 years of my career at the Starfire Optical Range. I couldn't believe they paid me to have so much fun. I mean, I was in the lab doing things, setting up experiments, taking data. I think a lot of us are data freaks. We like to see, make sure things are working right. And it was just wonderful. Here's a one. This is pretty old. Everybody was showing pictures. I said, we never took pictures in the place because, especially of the people and some of the equipment. So I did find this. Let's see. I don't know if you can tell, but there I am, much younger with darker hair. And this is a 3.5 meter telescope. This is a celostat, 2 flat mirrors. We called it the beam director. The 1 meter, 1.5 meter is here. It used to be right here, and they actually moved it up the hill into that observatory. And this is a bit of an older picture, but there's 2 1 meter class mirrors on either side of which was the original building out there, that I was able to get installed and accept it and do a lot of testing on it. So, oh, there we go. So I love these pictures. This one, I did not mean to, hopefully I didn't do that. There we go. What was I going to say here? So this is we called it the 3-beam picture. This actually made it into the National Geographic calendar of, I don't remember what year anymore, early 90s, maybe. Do you remember? You don't remember? And so that was cool. We used to have a family night where because we worked such crazy hours, because we all loved it. And we were just dedicated to that. And we were such a team that people, even though we were military, civilian, and contractors, we all just said we worked at the SOR, or Dr. Fugate was our boss. So we were a very tight team of quite a mixture. And as we were talking about in the earlier conversations, that was our identity. We worked at the SOR, and that was my dream, to be on the mountaintop with telescopes. And that's what I was able to do. Very proud of that. This is the 3.5 meter telescope, which is right there, a much later picture with a sodium beacon. So how many of you know about adaptive optics? You might have heard that. Oh, quite a few people. Okay. Well, this is where it was born, and on Coatland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with Dr. Robert Fugate. And this was an animation, but when I transferred it in, it doesn't animate anymore. But as you know, you come in with a plane wave, like from a star far away. When I show kids, I have a flat sheet of paper, as you're coming in, to help them get the image. Basically hits our atmosphere, gets all messed up, right? And so you have these intermediate slopes in here. And so you come and you just get a blob like that, right? And so the wavefront sensor actually measures the intermediate slopes of all of that, has a control system, goes back, and voila, you close the loop, and poof, you have a much clearer picture like that. So in the earlier days, we'd have these raw images that would still need some correction, and so we'd even clean them up. My first job at the lab when I worked with Dr. Fender was actually doing this part manually. At that time, adaptive optics, that was all classified. Can't remember when it was declassified, 92 or 93, somewhere in that time frame. So I was already very familiar with atmospheric turbulence and all of that. And so this was really good. So I don't know, do we have time to play the videos? Let's see, can I just click on it, or? Huh? Just advance the slide? Oh, I hit the wrong one. I'm sorry. So there you see it dancing around. Oh, both of them went on. Okay, it's going to turn into that you couldn't tell that was a binary. So over here, that's okay. We can still going. I like this animation because it's just a very simple explanation of adaptive optics. It's actually a Gemini telescope in Chile, the model for it. So, you have your primary, secondary, you have light that's going to be coming through, and it goes through an adaptive optics system. They have it very rudimentary here. Usually it's down in a Houde path down the bottom, very complex. But this is a very simple explanation of it. I mean, it's all the basic components, really. And so light comes in, bounces around here a little bit, and this is actually the the deformable mirror. So you're going to see all this blur. Down here is a wavefront sensor that's determining all those individual slopes. It's talking to the deformable mirror that's going to change shape conjugate to that. And so once you close it, it's going to give that signal back so that when the light reflects off of it, poof, you have a, there you go, an object. And so I spent most of my career working with that in different forms. I give a slide on the last part. So I'm going to put both of these together here because these are some of the earlier pictures, but I love them because, well, they're in the constellation Orion. Did you notice? There's a theme here. I still love astronomy, but I realized that I'm much better engineer and really love the optics than the instruments that astronomers use. And that's why I wanted to come here so badly. So no adaptive optics, very blurry like you saw on the other one. Hubble was the main telescope in town at the time. And when we were looking at this, there was this dot. And we didn't, first you think it's your camera saturated. And Dr. Fugate actually, he has good connections. They were able to task Hubble to look at the same area. And they got some really good science on that. I think it was the beginning, I keep forgetting because it's been so long. I think that provide new science on the formation of new stars, I believe, I don't quite remember everything, but we actually got some really cool science out of this. And so it was this an example early on what adaptive optics could really do. And of course, now we use it for many, many different things. And so the main thing, I've worked on almost all of these, high resolution imaging of man-made satellites. You had talked about that. When it was declassified and transferred to the astronomical community, it was actually what they call disruptive technology. Astronomers had been looking at this for years. They knew about adaptive optics, or they knew, it was actually, I think it was patented in the 50s. I forgot the guy's name. I don't know if you, thank you. And I think when it was finally declassified and showed that we got it to work, he was invited to the meeting at Kirtland, and he says, "What took you so long?" That's the story I have heard. I wasn't there, unfortunately. I think I was actually here at the university at the time. But every telescope that was being built incorporated adaptive optics, and all the existing ones, it took quite a few years, but they were all quote unquote retrofitted as far as I know, but that's what it was. The next thing is what we've talked about a little bit when we were talking in some of the smaller groups of airborne laser weapons. And John Otten, Dr. John Otten back there, he worked on the Airborne Laser Lab in the 80s. And then there was the ABL, Airborne Laser. I know there's similar acronyms, but that's just the way, that's the way the Air Force operates. And now we're working on smaller scales in the division that I am to put these on smaller aircraft. And so it has had an evolution, and we're still working on that because it's a hard problem. It's not easy. I also spent a lot of time in laser communication through the atmosphere and space, and did that for a while. The only thing I haven't worked on here is ophthalmology. But after adaptive optics was declassified, we actually had ophthalmologists come to our site to learn how to do that. If you go to your eye doctor and they take pictures, they have a small AO system in there, and they're looking through the vitreous humor in your eye and and they are able to detect diseases much earlier now. So ophthalmologists have really taken advantage of that, at least in the medical field on that. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, because I just looked at you, Susan, remembered about the family component. When I worked at the Starfire Optical Range, I had a son, and he was medically fragile, took a lot of care, and was very sick. And I couldn't work normal hours. And Dr. Fugate was really sensitive to that. And because we're a telescope facility, basically can work 24/7. And he put me in charge of one of the mounts that was like a swing shift. And if he hadn't done that, and I was in a regular area, I wouldn't be here talking to you today because he basically saved my career. And so there are people out there that are very sensitive to that. You get to know them, and there's definitely opportunities for you to continue working with a family, even with crazy circumstances like mine. But I look back and realize what both you, Janet, and what Bob did for me in early days and in my career. And so I owe a lot to them. All of us have mentors. Look for mentors that can help you get through maybe tough times or just any time, for career advice, for even family and different things like that. Just life. Should we just say life? Sometimes I know you'll get this. Life is a 4-letter word. It can be hard. and lots of, it's challenging. So I'll just end with, what do I do now? So now I run the laser division at the Air Force Research Lab, and we do a lot of work in fiber lasers. We have the records for that at 1 micron. Now we're working more on 2 micron. And for a while we worked on diode pumped alkali lasers, which was the next generation after all the chemical lasers that we worked in that were both on the ALL and the ABL in the earlier days. And that was a smaller version, and that unfortunately has stopped, but much to the chagrin of one of my colleagues. And aero optics, because we're looking at putting lasers on an aircraft, you have to really be concerned about both the jitter, and then you're going at such a high speed, you have aero optics effects coming around. It's a very thin layer, but it's extremely turbulent. And how you're going to get that laser out of that aircraft, out of that window onto a target with enough fluence to do some damage. And so we actually have a small wind tunnel that we put together, I don't remember how many years ago now, maybe 6, 7, something like that. And that we can actually do experiments on small models and get a lot of information from. So that's good. And that's the old DPAL laser, and this is the fiber laser. So it's not just the lasers, it's always the beam control and the atmospherics, and it's all a system, and it all has to work together. So all of you in your studies, you have part of those components, and when you look for jobs, are you part of a team where you can fill those gaps in any different types of expertise? And I end with my favorite picture of the sodium beacon. Now, one of the things I was going to say about adaptive optics was, adaptive optics, you have to have enough light to run your adaptive optics system. And so what also the Starfire Optical Range pioneered was what we called laser guide star or laser beacon adaptive optic systems. And that's where now you've got the green laser on that earlier picture. I meant to talk about that, the earlier picture. Sorry about that bouncing around here. But that created light by Rayleigh scattering. So it's very directional. And so you get that light back that you can run that AO system and see the dim object that you're trying to study or look at. And so for years, astronomers seem to have known that there is a layer of sodium at about 90 kilometers up, and it's about 10 kilometers thick. We did a lot of work and a lot of study to look, had a theory that maybe asteroids were repopulating some of that sodium layer. So we had some fun experiments on that. But now that's much higher. So I can put this down for a second because I can't do it with that. I guess I could try. So, so if you're for the Rayleigh beacon, you have to be up at about 20-ish kilometers so you get that Rayleigh scatter off the molecular nitrogen and oxygen before it gets too thin. Well, you still have a cone. And you really want to emulate a column. And so that cone gives you errors and isoplanetism. You've probably heard of some of that. And with the sodium beacon, because it's so much higher at 90 kilometers, much more simulating that column of light and get much, much better correction from that. There is a little bit of a thing. It's not necessarily a sharp point, so to speak. So there's a lot of work to do because it's actually it's by a mechanism of resonant fluorescence, and now you've got that 10-kilometer thing. But so we did a lot of work on that. All that was really a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun in my career. I now really mentor the next generation try to get kids interested in math and science, that all of you have gotten interested in that and have come here. So you've had mentors or teachers in your career or in your earlier life that brought you here. So, but I try to do that. So I will end with that.
We'll still take some questions here. And
Okay, we'll just pass it around.
yeah, pass it around, and I'll let y'all call on the question. We have someone to start.
So I heard a lot of people say, like, these days you're supposed to jump around jobs so you don't end up stagnating in a role. What do you guys think about that advice? Jump around companies.
I can start. I would say that it depends on your environment. So if you're in an organization, I can say from my experience at the Air Force Research Lab, there were so many projects, or at a national lab, for example, there were so many projects that you can choose from, and you can change, and you can vector. My concern when I was looking for a job was my peers were telling me that they were going to work. Aerospace was hiring and paying really big salaries in LA, for example, the aerospace community. But they were working on one small project, a contract, and when that contract went away, as Susan would say, so did their paycheck. So they had to look for another study number, if you will, you know. So I think that's why it's really important to pick your environment so that you have some flexibility and you can go into different directions. And I'm a big proponent of the national labs, of the service labs, big environments, big flexibility. Now, maybe that exists in industry, but when I was talking with my peers at the entry level, for example, you really had to scramble when your program got cut. So just wanted to offer that.
Add on to hers real quick.
Sure.
Since we're talking about the same
Yeah,
environment
go
of
for
Air
it.
Force Research Lab, is that we're such a large entity that that even within where we were both at to begin with at Kirtland Air Force Base, there were enough different projects that could go around. Like I was first in your branch and then was out at the Starfire Optical range and loved to stay there for a long time, moved around. But I have to say, you can even move to different labs. You can move to, because right now there's about 10-ish directorates across the country for the Air Force Research Lab. We're going through reorganization now because of Doge, et cetera, you know, but it'll all come out fine. But the fact that you could, maybe you want to move to Rome, New York for a while and work on some of the work, the information directorate. There's the aerospace directorate in Dayton. There's so many different areas, especially when you're working with the federal government. I'm not sure how it does in like the Sandia and those types of labs. But once you're in the federal government system, you don't have to start over on retirement or anything like that, or even your leave, by just moving around. And so you almost are in such a humongous company that you're able to do that within that environment. So if that helps, you know, you could still do that. It's just you wouldn't have to be starting all over again in a different way. That's just one benefit of at least the government labs.
Yeah, let me add one thing, and that is, you know, science advances always, and technology improves always. Just don't get stale. Okay.
As an extreme moderate, I have a very strong opinion about this question.
Brace yourself.
What are your experiences and opinions about DEI? How do you do it the right way? Is there a right way? Do you have to be more selective with DEI, or do you do it randomly or very liberally?
When you're a government contractor, there are certain requirements, or at least there were. I guess I don't know right now what's going on with that, but there were certain requirements for affirmative action and so on. Under certain administrations, you have to follow the rules. The way that we dealt with it in my company and also at the universities I worked at was all about performance. Who who has the right qualifications and who can do the job. That, I mean, there was, I mean, because we were lean and mean, you had to, right? We
I guess-
followed the rules, but you had to.
Let me clarify
Yeah, sure.
why I'm asking the question.
Mhm.
I've found that there is a lot of potential that doesn't bubble up unless you're helping them to bubble up. And so I'm asking if the idea of implementing DEI, not the official government, here's DEI, you know, like how do you bubble up talent that isn't gonna bubble up on its own?
I think that applies to all human beings. Honestly. Did you?
Yeah, because I'm more sensitive about that. I think I probably filled a role, you know, when I first came on, I thought I probably filled a slot, but I didn't really care. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. But in terms of looking at that now, I see what you're saying. I am very proponent of mentoring and make sure that we have a student that's going to be coming in now. He just got his master's at New Mexico State. And maybe he wasn't the stellar in the eyes of somebody else, but because I guess you could think he's probably someone from DEI because he's a Native American. But I just said, you know what, everybody has their gifts and talents. It may take a little longer to find them. Maybe they're a late bloomer. And so I'm of the proponent, and I try to spread this around as much as I can where I work, that we just need to strong mentorship and bring them up. And regardless, I don't think about DEI, but I do think about people, looking at people with their gifts and talents in that respect, and try to get rid of that term DEI, because everybody has that. It's not just GPA. It's not just what school they're in. It's not just, you know, but try to give everybody a chance. But that's my personal, I have infected quite a few people with that. So, and it depends on where you go on the type of folks. Is that kind of what you're asking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to? I guess I haven't been in an environment where there's been an active program in DEI. So it's always kind of confused me when I've heard, you know, the presidential directive forbidding it, because it's just like Imelda said, in our community, in our optics community, for example, it's really about teamwork and people helping each other. So I've never been in a situation where there were numbers forced one way or another. So it's that ending of DEI kind of perplexed me. I've not experienced that. Have you?
Not the capital DEI,
Uh-huh.
but just a lot of experience, like being a TA.
Uh-huh.
I've won the TA of the Year award from 3 different colleges
Okay.
because I'm very sensitive to people that could bubble up
Uh-huh.
if they're given the right opportunity.
You got it.
But I've noticed that a lot of people don't have the confidence to bubble up on their own
Absolutely.
until you DEI them, right? And it's not looking down on people as if you needed the help, but I think there are a lot of people that would benefit from the help where people think, now let's just let the people bubble up naturally. You know, let's skim the top, and whoever will bubble up naturally, that's how it's supposed to work.
No, you got to mentor. I'm just a strong proponent of mentoring at all levels. I don't agree with the thought of just that someone will bubble up. That's almost personality dependent. So now you're letting people fall through the cracks that may not have that, for whatever you want to say, to bubble up on their own.
Right. And we probably have, you know,
Same
the same opinion
thing,
about
yeah.
this, but there
Yeah.
other people might have
I
different
understand.
experience, and you know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, kind of along similar lines, I guess. Dr. Fender, you know, you have been a huge advocate for women in optics through, you know, scholarships and things like that kind of support. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how those scholarships and things can impact people's lives and how they can sort of break barriers for students who may not have traditionally been represented in optics throughout history.
And that's basically said it, you know, helping women in particular, achieve their goal, their educational goals has been really a focus. That is, let tuition not be the major barrier, but not 100% paying that, but at least taking some of the pressure off. I think there's a psychological benefit also of receiving a scholarship, and Julie Bentley, the president of SPIE, articulated it when she received a scholarship and she was an undergraduate. And she said she was thinking about dropping out, not going to graduate school, because the tuition was about her dad's salary at Rochester. It was very expensive. She got $5,000 scholarship, which didn't pay the tuition, but she said it was just her professor, Duncan Moore, sent her to SPIE to receive that $5,000 check, basically the award ceremony. It inspired her that somebody had confidence. There was a selection committee, and they looked at her application and said, she has promise. We have confidence in her. She said she couldn't let that down. And so she stayed in school and she graduated, but it was just this note of confidence. But I will say one other thing that Imelda was talking about. There's money, but there's also professional development. And I think we all agree that helping hand financially is really important, but it takes team spirit, team mentoring, people, a good TA, looking out for the team and mentoring that student that you see as the diamond in the rough, bring that student up to par. So I think mentoring can be quite informal, but it's all about teamwork. It's all about being part of a team and having supportive teams. So that's why it's really important to find the right location, to find the right home. Your first job is so important, so you don't get stuck someplace where you're not going to be able to have support and grow and so forth. You have to find a good supportive environment. So that's why we're here, basically trying to offer some options to your career planning. And we appreciate you all being here. I think we've cut into your cocktail time or whatever. Probably not old enough.
Just interrupt for 1 second. We're gonna need to stop the recording, but we're able to keep having this conversation going. We can still take time for
I forgot about it being recorded. I shouldn't have said that, should I?
time for a couple more questions is great for everyone who wants to stick around.
Erase.
This question is between the three of you, you have a sort of wealth of knowledge that spans from fundamental research all the way up through running programs of record, both on the customer side and on the actual supplier side. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on, I guess the other part here is that you also have experience over multiple administrations with different strategies for acquisitions and transition. And so curious what your thoughts are on what's sort of the optimal or the best approach to bridging the value gap when it comes to technology transition.
That's a big question. That's an important question. That's the reason I went to Air Combat Command. And I think if there are opportunities for rotational positions to do what Susan talked about, if you can be a scientist with the technology embedded in operations, just for a rotation, for example, you don't have to change careers. I didn't go to Air Combat Command with the thought of changing careers. It's going to be a year, rotation and come back to the lab. But I just think changing your environment, interacting, if you can physically go out with whoever your user is And it doesn't have to be a military one, you know, and I don't know how to answer that from a commercial viewpoint.
So I want to take a minute and just understand your question a little bit better and where you're coming from. Tell me what the context is.
Yeah, sorry. So I am a PhD student here, but I'm also an employee for the NSWC training in Indiana. And so I've seen a little bit of the government side of, you know, pushing out SBIRs, and I've seen the academic side of accepting them and also trying to you know, build out technology. And it seems, you know, and other people talk about this, but it seems as though there's a fairly large gap between a lot of emerging technologies and then ultimate transition for them to programs of record or into commercialization. And it feels like, especially for government labs, it's really difficult to take cool technologies and useful technologies, even if they are well demonstrated, and actually get them across that gap. And so I'm curious if you guys think, you know, something like switching to a vertical integration model where the government tries to do all of the construction and building and testing and everything, or shifting entirely to a commercial model where the government is essentially just steering. I guess that's more where the question is coming from, is from all of your experience, does one path seem to sort of have more advantages than the other?
Well, I can answer that from the imaging side, from Maui, for example. So it's almost like we ignored the structure, because and you can do that if you know if you have good results in the laboratory, and you can get time in an operational facility, for example. You've done a VFR from lab to operations, and you can find opportunities to demonstrate your technology integrated into their daily operations, and they can't live without it. And I mean, that was just one example of success. So I know you're you know, I understand your debate. What's a better model? But I think that clever people and determined people and people that, you know, have good intentions of making an impact tend to find ways to get their technology inserted into whatever the commercial applications or whatever. And I think it's physical presence is what it boils down to. Physical presence, in my mind. Like Susan was doing, physical presence.
You're asking a very loaded question. The attempts to go the commercial route started with SOFX, well, didn't start, but recently addressed by SOFX. What is it? AFWorks. You know, SOFWorks, AFWorks. What is Navy doing nowadays? And the point is, people are trying to say, okay, folks, and the Army Acquisition Lab and so on. What, you know, we've got these problems. Okay, commercial world, come in and help us solve these problems. But the things that people run into when they do that is who owns the intellectual property. When people invent stuff and the government says, yeah, we want it, but oh, by the way, we're giving your intellectual property to anybody, especially the guys we like to work with, which tend to be bigger companies. Eventually people catch on to that and they go, whoa, 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 whoa. We did all the investment. We're not getting any return on our investment. Our investors are walking away from us because of it. Banks won't lend money to us because of it. So it has its limits. Okay. The way that we did it, and it's just our experience, it's not a model, is we became aware of some issues that were happening in the field, you know, where some operators were approaching us. This is how we got started with some of this stuff. They were approaching us with a problem. Now we have the technical backgrounds to say, we think we know a solution to that, but it took like 2 years for someone who would be willing to see a demonstration, because somebody at Crane, by the way, had written a white paper, I won't mention his name, that said that it was physically impossible to do this. Well, it wasn't. And once people started seeing the demos, they wanted more and more and more. But you have to figure out a way to fund yourself to span that time span. So you can't be, you have to have a bunch of things going. And this is why at the national labs and at larger companies, it's less of an issue because you can shift people around from one project to another. If a program falls through or is canceled, you can often shift people around. If it's too big, then you might lose a division, and heads go. But the point is, you have to have options because it takes so darn long and it's very risky. I mean, I will tell you that banks oftentimes, investors oftentimes refuse to fund or loan to companies who work in defense because of all the delays and, you know, government shutdowns and all the rest. They don't care. They just know that they don't like your metrics while that's going on. So it is tricky. And by the way, it's not a military industrial complex. It's a military congressional industrial complex. It's very tightly bound. And it's hard to work. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, did you want to add to that?
I don't know if there's much more I could add, but yeah, kind of hate the valley of death. and we keep looking at ways that we can jump across that. You're familiar with the TRL levels. So, you know, the labs go basically 1 through 6, but we tend to be at 5, maybe early 6 because of the type of funding that we get or don't get. And so there's issues with that. We've been giving this a lot of thought and trying to figure out how to get some of the work we're doing across this. I'm trying to see if we can't work, you know, beyond after demos to work with small companies nearby, not those in other states, but like in Albuquerque or New Mexico or near places that we can work more closely to maybe prototype and get across some of that. But it's very difficult. And I don't think my programs have not found that solution yet. We're working on it again. And just like we've seen, I'd say like the adaptive optics, you know, that kind of went straight declassified and went to all the astronomical community. So that was a little bit different. So if there's something that you could have that people really want, that you can get out there and bypass some of the government type of regimented testing and hoops. But it's frustrating.
But Imelda, what you said was what somebody wants. So you can get a technology funded, even if you get this through the valley of death and get it funded to demonstration. But what for if nobody's going to use it? If nobody's going to pick it up? So I think coming from a demand side. So if you can get people interested and be the demanders of this, then that helps you get that 6 for more mature funding. So people asking for it, because that tech push, you can, over the years, you can get money maybe to mature something, but it's still going to be on the shelf if nobody wants to use it. So it's got to be from whether it's commercial or defense or whatever. Somebody's got to want it. Somebody's got to want to buy it before you invest in that, and they'll pull it over the valley of death. If you have somebody going, here's my pocketbook and we really want it, you know, or if it's in the government, here's our roadmap and we need this by blah, blah. It helps people, technology developers, get the budget to be able to mature the technology because they have somebody that's asking for it. When it's all technology pushed,
it's tough.
Thank you.
Very nice. Okay.
So I think we should formally end this. But
Thank you.
if you still have a few minutes to stick around, do you still have a little bit of time if people want to come up and ask you questions afterwards? Okay, so they'll be around for a little, I don't know how long, let's just say a few minutes. They've had a long day too. But I'd like to thank the 3 of you again for coming out and giving us this
Thank you for inviting us.
extra special